I'm going to do a little bit of a video on fasteners, try to explain bolts, rivet nuts, and helicoils so that you know exactly how you should use those items in different cases with regard to restoring your car. So let's start here with bolts. So this is our selection of bolts. These are all standard, meaning that they are the old style. The new cars all have metric stuff on them. We are still putting standard type threads back on our classic cars out here. And so ours start with a 1/4 inch. That means that it's a 1/4 inch diameter. That's how big the bolt is around. And the things that distinguish this bolt from other bolts is the quality of the bolt. And this is a grade 8, and that's annotated by the number of little marks that are on there. Grade 6 is what would have come on the cart when it was new, and then there's the standard bolt that has no markings on it, which is something you probably would find at Home Depot. These are also coated with a gold anodizing stuff that makes it non-rustable. So when we put it on there, you don't get it home and immediately the bolt starts rusting at the head. So these are 1/4 inch. They come in various lengths. So we start over here at 3/4 of an inch and go all the way up to about 3 or 4 inches. And then we change to the next size, which would be a 5/16, which means it's a bigger bolt around than this bolt. So what you're basically going to do when you're working on your classic cars, you're just going to replace what's there, but you kind of need to know what size bolt you have. One way to do that is to buy one of these, which is you can get these on Amazon, but they basically are thread ID type devices that allow you to screw the bolt in to see if you know if it's going to fit. So these right here also have, that tells you the size of the bolt and the threads. That says a 5/16 24. That means it's 5/16 around and there's 24 threads per inch. So if we tried to screw this in there, it wouldn't go in because 24 is what we call a fine thread bolt. If you go to a 5/16 over here, a 5/16 18 thread and 24 thread. This would be an 18 thread. We call them coarse thread, and you can see that one threads right in. Now, if I try to put it in the 5/16 24, it won't start. It'll start, but it just stops turning. That's because the bolt that would be required for that is in our other section here, and this is a fine thread. I'm going to hold these up so you can kind of see the difference in the threads. This is a coarse thread, and this is a fine thread. See how much closer the threads are and how much further apart they are. Now, why do they do that? Well, the fine thread has more threads per inch, which means that when a nut's on there, it has more threads to grip on and it makes it hold tighter. And, you know, the guys that built those cars back in the day or designed them actually figured out how tight they wanted to clamp everything, and they would design a bolt for a particular use. Most of the time on the fine thread, it's suspension or something where it's critical that it holds really tight. The rest of the time they use coarse thread bolts. So we have different selections of the sizes from 1/4 to 1/2 here, but you can see up here we get up as big as 7/16, 5/8, 9/16, 3/4. These are usually bolts that are used on suspension. Specifically, some of these Broncos need great big bolts. So we have a lot of really bigger bolts up here. Another bolt that's commonly used is called a carriage bolt. And look at this, it has a different head on it. It's domed, but the gripping is right here. So this would slide down and be flush. Now you'd find a bolt like this in the bed of your pickup where you'd drop it in and this would catch, but this would be the cover on it. And bumper bolts have the same kind of head on them. They're a smooth head, and the bumper has a square opening on it for the bolt to fall in there and catch. Now the nuts are the same way. They're 1/4 20 pitch, meaning 20 threads per inch, and they're 1/4 and they're 28 threads per inch. So now that should be helpful to you, because if you get one of these right here that you can get on Amazon pretty cheap, you can check your old bolt inside of this and know what size that you're going to need. So when you order the new bolts, you don't get the wrong thing, especially if you have a difference between a coarse and a fine thread bolt. Bolts are the biggest part of what we do here. We keep a big selection of them. We use them all the time. The other thing we use are lock washers. And you can see that this washer has they call them split. And so when you push the bolt down tight, this lock washer springs together, but it puts pressure back on the bolt and allows it not to turn, so it doesn't loosen up. The other thing that we do is flat washer. Now we buy a thicker style flat washer. This is a flat washer right here, but it's thicker in here because it does a better job of holding than does the cheaper ones that you might buy at a hardware store. And we want your car to be fixed perfectly right and all these bolts to hold tight. Now, the other thing that we do, and I've talked about this before in other videos, is we have two guys check all our bolts, and then we use a ink marker like this or a paint marker, and we dab a little ink on there so we know that every bolt that we put on your car or the car that we're working on for somebody else has the bolts have been tightened and checked by two people. Okay, now we're going to go back here and look at something else. This is what we call a nut zert. I'm not exactly sure what the right terminology is, but you can see it's a little barrel type thing. It has a little ridge on the top and some splines. And we use these quite often in areas where there's no way to reach around behind to put the nut on, and we're not really planning on having to carry any load or pressure on it. We need to bolt something down flat. We do a lot of this like on floors, body parts, metal, and things of that nature. So let me show you how that works. We've already put two in here, and you can see when you install them, or the bolt, this would be an example of how you'd use it on a piece of metal. You have a nut zert that goes in, and when you install it, it swells it on the back side. We actually use an air-driven one, and it has a stud that sticks out, and they're different sizes, back to what we were talking about, between 1/4, 5/16, 3/8. And you screw this on like this, as far as it would go on, and you get a bit that size. Now, it's always a good idea to have a piece of scrap metal like this when you're trying to make those fit, so that you don't put it into the car and then it doesn't fit in the hole. It's too big and you can't make it pull up tight. So I believe it's at 11/32 is the right bolt size for this. Well, see, this is a good example of testing this. So we're going to start with 11/32 just. So now you can see that 11/32 is not big enough. It doesn't go in there. So that's why you test this a little bit to make sure you get the right one. So let's go with the 3/8. So the 3/8 fits the hole pretty well. It's a little bit loose, but it fits, I believe. So now what you do is you take this right here and you set it inside of there, press firmly down, pull the trigger. You can see that it's already in there tight. Now, this tool, you have to turn and screw that back out. Now you can see that we put this one in, and you can see on the backside, see where it kind of got a swole spot there, a little expanded, I guess is a better word for it, all three of these. But you see, you can't push that back out. Now, if you have the inability to put a nut on this side, you can use these in areas like floor pans and metal parts that don't carry a real heavy load. So let me take you over here and show you an example where we're getting ready to do one of those. Okay, so we've welded in all new floors in this truck, but this part right here is the transmission inspection panel that bolts in. It doesn't weld in case you need to take it out to work on the transmission or remove the transmission. So the first thing we do is set this in here and then find all of our holes, and we've drilled small pilot holes here, and then we lock it down with what's called a cleco, that's an airplane tool actually, but you stick that in like this with this tool and let go, and now the cleco is holding this down so it doesn't move while we drill. And then we'll come back around in each one of these holes and drill it to the right size, remove the panel, and put new nut zerts in, and then put nuts and bolts, or nuts with washers, all the way around and bolt this down. So hope that's helpful. We'll go on and do something with helicoils next. All right, last but not least is a helicoil. And that's a method where you actually are putting a thread inside a cavity where the threads are gone, they're worn out, and it has to be able to retain some strength, like maybe a starter bolt or an oil pan bolt or something of that nature. So I have 40 years of collections of helicoils here. This is one that I bought. The other thing I've found out about helicoils lately is that there are good kits and bad kits. Used to be you bought a helicoil kit and they all work, but I bought a bunch of these 3/8 24s before I found this one, and I got it at Granger. And basically what it comes with is a drill bit and a tap and two tools, and this is called the helicoil right here. And that's basically a thread insert, and you'll notice on the back side of it, it has a little retainer right there that's bent over the hole. So here's what you do. First, you take the bit out and you re-drill the hole where the threads are bad. Then you take this tap and you put it in your socket. I have this tool right here that I use. Let me show you how that works. This looks like a set of sockets, but they're actually made for these taps. And so when you remove this tap, you can check and find one that it locks into like that. See, and then you take this out and you can use your ratchet on this end so that when you are trying to thread into the hole, you can use the ratchet and put some pressure on it to make it work. One thing that's real trick on this is to make sure you get it straight. Don't get it going crooked. Take your time, and it'll always go a little bit slow right at front because there are not a lot of teeth right at the very beginning. So you kind of have to keep working on it till you get it to start, and then go slowly. These things can break if you get them in there crooked, and there are a hard time to get them out. Use some thread lubricant on there, and it should work just fine. Don't go too fast. Go very slowly. Once you get that done, it's time to put the thread insert in. And as I said, the thread insert looks like this. And here's the tool for that. This is this tool. And see, it's got a little notch on the end of it. So you put your thread in there like your thread insert like this. See how it went right over that? And you put it down in the hole and start on the thread and just screw it in. It'll go right in. I put Loctite on that before I put it in. And that looks like, there's two different kinds, but this is the lipstick type. And you put a little bit on there, and that'll hold this thread insert from coming back out if you have to remove the bolt at some point. Now, when you're all finished, then you take a punch and you knock this little insert end out and stick a magnet down in there and remove it from the hole. And now you've got a new thread. I'm Barry Wilson with Wilson Auto Repair. And I have some other videos that go along with this showing how we put a set of nut zerts on a fan shroud. And hopefully they'll all be interesting to you and help you understand how you can take care of the nuts and the bolts and the zerts and the helicoils on your car.